l'inspiration de la bodhicitta et ensuite, ensemble, nous ferons la pratique des 4 incommensurables, si vous voulez bien. D'accord ? Je vous explique.
I'll explain after, maybe, what these practices are about.
Rolai penjara sanje ro par sho sanje chodan soje chonaim la chanchu pardo dane chamso che dage jinso jiber sunam che rolai penjara sanje ro par sho sanje chodan soje chonam la chanchu dane chamso che ro soje ber sunam che ro la penchra sanje ro bar sho sem che tam che Dewa tan deve jo tan dembar churche dungar tan dungar che jo tan trawar churche dungar mebe dewa tamba tan mendrawar churche nyeren chadan tan trave Tanyom Shambo La Nebar Churche Simche Tamche Dewa Tan Deve Jodan Dembar Churche Dungar Tan Dungar Che Jodan Trawar Churche Dungar Mebe Dewa Tamba Tam Mendrawar Churche Nyeren chadan tan trave tanyom chenpo la nebar churche semche tamche dewa tan deve jodan dembar churche dungar tan dungar che jodan trawar churche Dungar mebe dewa tamba ta mendrawar churche Nyeren chadan dan trave tanyom chenpo la nebar churche Chomden de jambe yang la chan tsai lo kange lo drim nye dendra nye dara namda rab sarve chi nye tungun chi shen si chi ni je dokara le bamze kanda si be tsunrar mari muntuma dongara shi sarve dro tso kun la puji tar se yang la tu ju yang den su Rudara Chedro Nyumo Nilon Leje Chadro Drze Chen Mahri Musra Dungara Nyugo Chinye Chunze Rajana Taju Darzun Yundena Luzo Gerze Tuvu Ko Chura Chudan Chuni Jent Dalu Musra Njambe Yang La Du Zeden Chuje Chenra Zreche Dalu Temo Mbarab Sat Kadan Tenju Shunlu Toba Ye Lodru Bobe Nawa Saradu Sor.
Thank you for your presence. It's a pleasure to see you again, to be together again. I believe that there are some new people here. So we have started a little while ago the study of the Bhattacharya, the Zangpo Chepe Munlam. They are aspirations. We could sum it up this way. They are as a wishing prayer, which is associated with this text. So there are a certain number of such texts. It is associated with a very important aspect of the Great Vehicle, which is the dedication of merits. I'm not sure if you've heard about this before, but within the Great Vehicle, it's a specificity of the Great Vehicle, actually. When we accomplish an action that is virtuous, a positive action, for example, it could be just an activity of basic charity, or it can be an activity like we are undertaking together, which is to study the Dharma. It can also be to meditate, to practice shamatha, vipassana. It can be other types of activity, a virtuous activity, like following certain ethical discipline, whether it's as monastic or secular. So all these activities are known as virtuous. These are activities that contribute to well-being. It is not that they are good in the sense of being socially being a social convention. It's not about that. Here we can look at what the Buddha's teaching says about this, in contrast to what is more conventionally known as good or not, or ethical or not. Of course, in every human society, we have norms, and we'll say that such activity is bad. And we can conceive, establish laws forbidding such and such activity, and other activities that are deemed positive. So in societies, of course, these rules evolve in time. And we can see that in such and such a society, certain activities are perfectly acceptable, and then you cross the border and these activities are considered illicit. So it's a little random. It's a matter of, we might say, choice. But from the viewpoint of Dharma, is it also like this? Did the Buddha choose a certain number of activities as good and others as not? As Buddhists, we should blindly follow his teachings and blindly think of such activities as positive or not. Of course, it raises this kind of question. But according to the Buddha's teaching, it is not a matter of arbitrary choice on the Buddha's part. A type of law that's imposed on us by a superior authority. The Buddha invites us to try to discern what is naturally negative and what is by nature positive. And this independently of defining a certain number of activities, whether it's through body or speech, as good or bad. There is what underpins these activities. That is volition. And this volition that is conditioned by our state of mind. And for the Buddha, there are certain states of mind that are by nature positive and others that are negative. So the term state of mind here, what I mean in Buddhist literature, the Chaitasika, Senchung, there are many translations. The mental factors. Sometimes we feel jealousy. This is a state of mind. It's a Chaitasika. Or we feel a feeling that is pleasant or painful. Sometimes we feel generous. That is a Chaitasika as well, Semjung. So it's the circumstances in which our mind finds itself. That is the faculty of perceiving, of knowing. It is always accompanied by different facets. For example, every instant of perception that is, for example, perceiving and being in contact with a phenomenon, whether it's visible, olfactory, taste. This experience is always accompanied by a feeling, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So it's not really the subject of today of going into this detail, but it is just to say that what is considered as positive is dependent on the state of mind and the consequences that this brings in our becoming. That is, by maintaining certain ways of thinking, certain ways of thinking about the world, this orients our mind orients us in a certain direction, in a certain future, and this future can be more easy, more happy. The pleasant or neutral sensation is dominant, or the sensation is more unpleasant. And the idea here is to try to discern the causality, to understand that all of us, in all our activities, the weakest animals to the most powerful human beings, all are looking through whatever they do, are looking for the same aim, that is, have a more pleasant life and to avoid pain. This is like the common denominator of all sentient beings without exception. But often we are mistaken with regards to this matter of causality that I just evoked. What are the thoughts? What are the actions that will, in fact, bring us what we wish for? And what are the thoughts and activities that will prevent us to achieve what we are wishing for, or lead us towards what we wish to avoid, which is more pain? So here there is an ignorance, very, very strong ignorance that we have. So it's not a dogmatic belief or a blind belief. It's really to be able to see the relationship between my way of seeing the world, my thoughts, and the activities that I undertake on the one hand, and understanding the nature of these activities, I can catch a glimpse of the results and of the consequences. Often our common way of reacting, which is not to not understand this causality. Of course, we're looking for well-being, but often it's for our own well-being. We maintain the causes that lead to the opposite, which is pain, suffering. Okay, let me just give a very simple example. For example, let's take a state of mind characterized by a hostile attitude that manifests as anger, and that expresses itself by physical and verbal violence. What underpins this? What underpins this state of mind? Well, a certain attitude, a certain perspective that is a very deep attachment to oneself. And a preference for oneself at the detriment of the other, and also certain expectations. For example, what makes us angry? If someone insults me, if someone steals something from me, or if someone hits me. And all this is just unacceptable for me. It's kind of hurts who I am. I can think of myself, oh, I'm a great teacher, I'm very important, and I wasn't served water, and I couldn't just get angry, whatever. I'm taking pride as in relationship to my identity. I have certain expectations, and when these expectations are not met or respected, well, of course, unhappiness arises. So long as I maintain these expectations, first point is how I position myself in the world towards others. What is the conception I have of myself? How do I conceive of myself? It's a conceptual activity here. The thoughts I have with regards to myself and to the world, these thoughts condition how I position myself. And of course, when contrary circumstances that go against these expectations arise, for example, I'm insulted or whatever, well, then anger and hatred arises, and immediately it's as if my life depended on it. So it's like there's like an instinctive reaction that comes from the power of having maintained this kind of relationship. I don't even think I have to get angry, so I just get angry. It's nearly it's like a spontaneous by the force of this habit. And so this all comes from a form of grasping. So you might think that those who follow anger maintain anger as a defensive means to protect themselves, to avoid suffering, to avoid being insulted. So, of course, independently of the emotional aspect of all this, this hostile attitude cannot just be reduced to this anger. It encompasses all the thoughts that are associated with it. So in a very kind of cold way, without any like emotion, you can think about how to protect oneself better. If someone hurts me, how do I respond? Whether it's with words or the security of your house or the relationship in the family. So there's a whole strategy that is built up that comes from the preservation of self and fear towards the environment and towards others. And there's a certain hostile attitude that can manifest in these states of anger and express itself through violent activities that will hurt other sentient beings. And so we undertake all this as a way to bring ourselves more security. And we can look more broadly. Countries are created this way. We build armies. We establish frontiers, and this is the potential. With we build the possibility of violent acts. We imagine harming others just to preserve oneself. Is it for that or not? The Buddhist teaching catalogs, if that's the right word, encompasses a certain number of thoughts that are described by the term klesha, nyunmungpa in Tibetan, klesha in Sanskrit. Sometimes in English we say afflictive obscurations. There are different translations, but kleshas the definition in the etymology of the term in Sanskrit and then in Tibetan is that it is a state of mind that is biased. Anger, hatred are not based on something that is just, on a perception of objective reality. It is always it's always based on a biased view. For example, the same situation, someone has something stolen, and the person who's the thief is not at all the same perception. The one who's the thief feels that he or she has gained something. The other one is hurt. So this person is angry. So anger is always linked to something that's very subjective from one's point of view. It's a certain biased vision of reality. This is one aspect of Nyun Mongpa. Mong in Tibetan means that the mind is obscured. It cannot see reality in a clear way. The other aspect is that all these states of mind are characterized by the fact that they create agitation. The mind is agitated. We could say in modern terms it's stressed. It's just of suffering, of not feeling well. When we're angry or when we're mad, it's not a nice feeling. It's not a pleasant feeling. And the fact that it's not pleasant, where does that come from? It's because the mind is agitated. The mind is not still. So it's unpleasant. So that's the first aspect of all. These are the aspects of all the kleshas. I gave the example of anger, but in the Abhidharmas there is a list of 26 states of mind that are classified together, but their root, their foundation, can be brought down to the three poisons, we call them. Ignorance is the first. A mistaken view. It's more pernicious. It's the most negative because it allows all the others. Then you have anger that I've spoken about already. We see very clearly how it's negative. Just by its nature, not necessarily by convention. And then the third that's much more difficult for us to deal with is desire attachment. It's classified as a negative by nature. Why negative? It's because we have to see what our state of mind is when there is desire. Our state of mind focuses on what is going to be pleasant or what can bring us something positive, but we don't have it yet. So it's experienced as a dissatisfied state of mind. We are dissatisfied with the fact that we don't have. That's the negative aspect by nature. It's the expectation of something that we don't yet have. It's a little more subtle. It's more difficult to recognize than hatred, for example. So these are the 3 poisons. All the other afflictions come from this or combine these: jealousy, pride, many others, many other forms of negative states of mind. They're negative by nature. So to come back where we started from, it's not a decision of the Buddha that it's negative. It is something that each one of us can check, can verify by oneself, through oneself, that these states of mind, a desire, anger, are by nature negative. So then the next question is something that is by nature negative produce something positive? Often when we observe causality, the effect resembles the cause. So, for example, this is an example given in Buddhist texts. If you plant pepper seeds, you can't expect that peaches will grow, which are sweet and tasty. We would have peppers that are very strong and. So it's in the same way when we maintain thoughts or undertake actions that on the basis of a state of mind that is negative by nature, which is of the nature of suffering and that is biased, we can easily see that it is not possible that the consequence will be the opposite. It will only reinforce this attitude. And the consequences, our future will reflect this, because our future is is constructed through our actions. So here, another very important point here in the Buddha's teachings, compared with other religious traditions, is that in certain religious traditions, it is not our actions, our thoughts that have the slightest consequence on what we will become, because somewhere we are subject to forces that are beyond us. In theistic traditions, there is the idea of a divine being, a God that rules the world and decides on the destiny of every being. Or we can think of that our actions or our thoughts have very little impact on who I am and what I'm going to become, what my future perceptions will be, because we think that all this is determined physically by external physical forces, and so we are how I think or how I act has no consequences on our future, because we are subject to external forces. So in a materialistic view, we are in Western tradition. We are kind of pulled between the two. On the one hand, we have there is this kind of divine force, and our actions have have no particular consequence. There is some external God, or there is materialistic aspect. That, for example, if I have an illness or what have you, it has nothing to do with my actions. So in the Buddhist tradition, going back a very long way, we according to certain masters, we can classify all different views or theories or conceptions of the world in two major categories. On the one hand, the eternalist category, and at the opposite of this, a category of thought that we could call annihilationist. It's not a very common term, but it's characterized by negation. On one side, we affirm. What do we affirm? The eternalists affirm that there is an eternal entity. For example, it can be something external from oneself, like a creator, a god, an entity that exists and that is eternal. Or closer to our ordinary intuition, it could be the self, the I. It exists eternally, substantially. This is part of the same view. For example, in ancient India, there were many different currents of thought, of doctrines, philosophical and religious, and most adopted different forms of eternalist presentations. Some said that there was only one real element, like a substance, like appearances might be illusory, but underneath these appearances, there is a unique reality. Or, for example, in the Samkhya school, they are dualistic. They affirm, on the one hand, there is matter, and on the other hand, there is consciousness. So they say these two elements are substantially different. So these are different categories of eternalist views. So, of course, Judeo-Christian religions would also be classified in this category, as well as many philosophical traditions that we find in the West. And then you have another category of thought, annihilationists. There are some thinkers in India who develop this view. It is to say, these are also associated with why is there something and why is there nothing, and hence nothing. Why is there something and hence nothing? So there is something eternal, something created, human beings. It is matter, it is God. That is the eternalist view. And others would say it is complete random. The world has no reason for being. It is just circumstantial, random. There is no reason for being. There is no principle or force that is a cause. So this is often associated with a denial of causality in certain versions of the annihilationist view. the Buddha and his disciples always try or tried through the ages to avoid these two extremes. And the Buddha says, adopt the middle way. The middle way is a path that avoids these two extremes, the eternalist and annihilationists, without necessarily saying that there's a middle that is something to be adopted. By middle, we should understand that we try not to fall into a bias, into a fiction with regards to reality. It's more, this is how we should understand the middle, the term middle. How is our becoming, our future, what will happen to us cannot depend on the will of another. Would you like me to develop arguments here? There are various masters who, in Buddhism, who elaborate on this thesis and how these eternalist theses are inconsistent, and they show the contradictions. It's a very vast subject to get into, to summarize. Aryadeva, for example, Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna, who go into these subjects in more detail. The idea of a primary cause is often refuted in the following way. If it is an entity that is considered as that precedes all the other entities, and that is the creator of everything else, what we call creation create, of course, is a verb, and as a verb, it designates an action, and an action is not something static. It is something that happens in time, that unfolds in time. And if what we call the creator is an eternal entity, we should look at it in the ultimate sense. Something that is eternal is something that doesn't change. And in that sense is static. It stays the same. And if from one moment to another it is different, it is no longer eternal. It changes. And so how can something that is eternal create? Because creating implies the unfolding over time. It's an action. It implies something that is not eternal. So if it's not eternal, it means that it depends, it itself depends on causes and conditions. So it doesn't suffice to itself. It has other causes. It cannot be primary cause. So when we say the eternal creator, there's something contradictory. It is to admit two things that actually in their definitions are opposed. Something that creates and something that unfolds in time and changes. And something that is eternal is something that cannot unfold in time. It is static. So in this sense, you cannot have a permanent entity that can create. So the same conception, here we applied it to an external creator, but we can think that in ourselves there is a self, an I, that creates the world. How can the I, that is something eternal, create? It can't. And then the other view, opposite from that, the annihilationist view, that effects can arise without cause. That's the view that the world can emerge from nothing, that at the beginning there was nothing, and from nothing the world appeared. All of a sudden. Or progressively, whatever. But there was something appeared, emerged, without any antecedents that made this happen. So why don't we see this reproducing itself today? In our experience, everything that manifests always arises because of causes and conditions. If a universe could arise out of nothing, at every instant, there are not universes that appear out of nothing because they need causes and conditions. So the view of the middle way is to avoid these two extremes and to explain that everything that is manifest depends on causes and conditions that are mutually dependent on each other, and that you cannot find one eternal entity that everything is dependent on, nor that things appear out of nothing. So if all phenomena that manifest depend on causes and conditions, then indeed our thoughts, our actions determine our future. It is the best explanation. Our future will not by chance become happier, nor due to the will of eternal entity that we cannot observe. What we are going to experience in the future depend on the thoughts and the actions that we undertake now. And how will our future be manifest? It depends on what type of thoughts and actions we have today. And if these are not naturally positive, then of course the consequences will be reflected in our future. If, on the contrary, we act on the basis of hatred, selfishness, of course our future will reflect this. So when we maintain hostile thoughts, or we are naturally inclined towards anger. And when anger is present, we are inclined to violence. And when we undertake violent actions, the negative consequences of violence will become manifest. Someone who starts wielding a sword because of anger, the world falls on this person, collapses on this person. It just in one instant, his life expectancy, just by the force of thought, the power of thought, his life expectancy will shrink by 90%. So we are so fascinated by appearances, by what's outside, that we forget that it has something to do with what's going on inside. We neglect what is going on inside ourselves, and we're completely taken by appearances and the pursuit of appearances. We're in the face of appearances, we're in desire or hostility or hatred, or when something pleasant happens, we desire, we want it to stay. And as soon as it's something unpleasant, we want it to disappear immediately. And this is because our mind is constantly turned towards appearances that are seen through our senses, our thoughts, and we are constantly preoccupied by this. We cannot look inside ourselves and see the connection between what is going on inside ourselves and what manifests on the outside. So what is considered by virtuous, positive activities are of course thoughts that have, as a consequence, more freedom, more well-being, and what is negative creates more suffering for ourselves. So part of the Buddhist practice is to adopt an quote-unquote ethical discipline that is to discern what is positive or negative, and to see that our mind is a little ill, confused, lost, without even realizing that we're hurting ourselves, and try to cure this. And so the practice of Dharma is essentially about finding, even in a temporary way, well-being. Well, okay, we haven't really moved forward, but anyway. It's the time for a break, and we can do a few questions on this subject, and then we'll come back to the dedication of merits. So we take a break. Oh, actually, no, I think it's question time. Rinpoche, just a short question. The concept of eternity. If co-production does not have a beginning or an end, if dependent arising does not have a beginning or end, is it eternal or not? Eternity is something we think of things as having their own entity, that something is in of it, is like that in and of itself, independent of anything else. So, for example, if I think of a cup, I think of one unit. But the reality is that this unit cannot be found. We like to say that everything somehow is mathematical, but the substantiality of a unit, something that's a one unit, cannot be found, because a cup is made out of a multitude of elements. We can think that it exists as multiple. But is the multiple the adding up of units? But at the basis, if one cannot find a unit, how can there be a multitude? So unit, multitude are, if we talk about a unit or a multitude, these are both concepts which certainly are useful. But so eternity is linked, that's something that is and that never changes, that doesn't have a beginning or an end, that stays identical to itself. So even in the question we say something. What do we do when we say something? We have conceived of a unit that doesn't have a beginning or an end. That's what something eternal is. But dependent arising, when we think it through, of course we think of it as a unit, a unity. But if we try to grasp the unity of dependent arising, it cannot be grasped. It is our mental representation. Because we add a term to it. We add a term to causality, or the unfolding of causality, the relationship between all phenomena that are mutually dependent. But this representation is simply a representation. So the nature of dependent arising is emptiness. Emptiness is dependent arising. So that, according to the Madhyamaka. Thank you, Rinpoche, for your teachings. When you spoke about the eternalist view, I believe you evoked the belief in the idea that phenomena exist substantially or in a substantial way. Could you please explain the meaning of substantiality? Actually, says Rinpoche, this is very connected to the previous question. You shouldn't look you shouldn't look for something that's not familiar, actually. Actually, it's something that's very familiar to us because it's what we do all the time. As soon as we think of something as a unit. And we think that it suffices to itself, when I say this glass, I just think of one thing. And from this morning to now, it's the same glass. There's the idea of a full-fledged unit. I think that this glass exists independently from my mind, from everything else. When I think about it, when I grasp it. That's the idea that it's a full-fledged entity, and associated with that conception, and the conception of permanence or eternity, or eternal. I think it's the same glass as it was earlier, unless it falls or breaks or it doesn't change. But when it breaks, it's no longer a glass. But so long as it has this function, this definition, it's something that is substantial. Substantive, we say in French, and substantive in English as well. We say a glass. It is a full-fledged entity. So we think that reality encompasses a certain number of elements, starting with myself and the world. Myself and the world around me. So at the root of this reification, I perceive, right? As I perceive, without necessarily falling into any particular philosophical theory, I have the impression, even without representation or without elaborating a theory, a philosophical theory, I believe that there is a subject who perceives and a world that is perceived. And this subject that perceives the world that is perceived, I presume that they are substantially different. You are not me, I am not you. The world is not me, I am not the world. So that's the idea of separate entities. And I think that this subject is eternal. From my childhood until now, I am the same person. Even if physically I've changed, intellectually I've changed my way of thinking, but I still conceive of myself as the same person. And the world has changed. Okay, we're in Dordogne. It's been Dordogne for thousands of years. The prehistory, there's always been the Vézère, the river. It's always been called the Vézère, or maybe it wasn't, but anyway, that's just naming things. It's always been there. These are reifications and attributing a substance and a permanence that they are independent things. But this conception is called into question. That's our instinctive way of grasping. It's our instinctive, intuitive, spontaneous, non-elaborated, based on an in-depth analysis. But then philosophical doctrines that we have often don't call into question this instinctive vision. On the contrary, it builds on it. It's true. The world has always been there. There is a self, and there is a self that is eternal, and we give it a name. And we associate it with the greater principle, our ancestors, our God, or whatever. But all this does not call into question. It simply reinforces our instinctive perception of reality. So the specificity of the Buddha's teaching, some say it is counterintuitive, counterinstinctive, whatever. It calls into question this a priori that we have towards reality, of reality. It is the first point that the Buddhist teaching underlines is that there is no I. Because the I plays a very, very important role in our activity, in our ordinary activity. The grasping of I, because of the grasping of I, the cherishing of the I, the pride, all the afflictions are deeply linked to this sentiment of I. So somewhere, it is very, very difficult at the outset for those who have never heard about this teaching. It seems so strange, so far. We're so convinced of the I. We talk about the I all the time, hundreds of thousands of times. And when we say there's no I, people ask strange questions. So people say, for example, I cannot use the personal pronoun I. How can I even talk? So we have to understand and why this is said. Being Buddhist doesn't mean to say that we renounce to the use of the word I. Thank you. We're going to have a little break. Take a little break. Half an hour. So half an hour. Thank you.
Sanje Chudan Soje Chonam La Changchu Bardo Dane Chapsoch Dage Jenso Jibe Sanamchi Rola Jir Sanje Drobara Sho Sanje Chudan Soje Janju Bardo Dane Chapsoch Dage Jenso Jibe Sanamchi Rola Benjira Sanje Drobara Sho Sanje Chudan Soji Chonam La Changju Pardo Dane Japso Che Dage Jinso Jibe Sonamji Rola Benjira Sanje Drobara Sho. Bien, rebonjour. Dont nous avons évoqué ce matin brièvement
how to discern between what a positive action is, what a negative action is. And in the context of the text that we are studying together, we indicated that it was the practice of dedicating merit and the aspiration prayers. So merit is a term, of course, that is associated with positive actions. So we evoked some notions that are linked to this. These are, of course, thoughts, our conduct, how mentally, physically, verbally we act, determine who we are, what we are going to become, the kind of perception we have, how the world manifests to us, how we see the world that manifests to us. This depends on our thoughts and our actions. What is positive is what leads towards more happy conditions. Gewele, we say virtuous actions, and the merit in particular is associated with all actions, or above all activities, associated with the development of wisdom, of discernment, and that favor the development of wisdom, of discernment. So in summary, the practice of the dedication of merit has a very important place in the practice of the great vehicle. On the one hand, one has to accumulate merit. That is to train oneself and ways of thinking, of acting, that are virtuous, and furthermore that are meritorious, that lead to the development of wisdom and discernment. And at the same time, so that all these dispositions are not stained by bias, or and so that they can really express themselves fully for our practice and for other people's practice, for other people. We will share this merit. This is what we call the dedication of merit, the giving back merit. That is giving these merit to other sentient beings. And according to the Great Vehicle, it is possible that others can profit, gain benefit from the positive act. Of course, a positive or a negative act first and foremost affect the one who accomplishes this act. For example, anger will affect me first, but it's not exclusive. If I cultivate violence, anger, it will also hurt many other people. We see it in history. We can check that. We can verify this. In the same way, through positive conduct, we can have an effect on other sentient beings. So it is to concentrate on this aspect that is giving back, giving one's merits. And these are expressed in a certain number of wishes. We wish that my positive conduct orient me and help beings in a certain way. And that is what is expressed in these aspiration prayers. And this might lead us to the context of these practices within the Buddha's teaching. How do we orient our practice? There are different approaches in Buddhism. One aspect that can be difficult for many people in the West is, of course, connected to our very strong tendency in the annihilationist tendency that we spoke about earlier. That is, that our actions, etc., we can think of their consequences in this life only. But we sort of remain with this kind of physical idea that I know this world exists and that I exist, etc. On the basis, these conceptions come from the fact that perceptions can take place. There's a perception, so it exists. And because there's a perception, and we can have different conceptions in terms of why perceptions occur. What is the nature of this reality that is perceived? Is there a distinct subject that perceives reality? And this comes back to what we spoke about this morning, earlier. But to sum up, one of the ideas that we have is that this reality that perceives is like an epiphenomena. That's kind of a materialistic or physicalist view It is just that there's a perception, like an epiphenomena. It is the what is affirmed in this viewpoint is that the objective reality, what really veritably exists, is the physical, material reality. That's reality. That's what's real only. And this reality that perceives, the perception, the consciousness, can only be explained on the basis of physical reality. So physical reality is predominant. And consciousness is an epiphenomena. It depends on it. It is produced by this physical reality. This is the physicalist viewpoint, and it is not the view in Buddhism. But it is a conception that is very strongly anchored today in the contemporary rational world. That is what is admitted. And if we don't admit this, we're not rational. We're sort of in a fantasy. I mean, so being rational is that is what that can be observed through our senses. So the reality that is observed is the reality that is physical, that exists independently of consciousness, and that existed before the emergence of consciousness, that is independent of consciousness. And in terms of what you learn at school, the theories of evolution, it is the theory that's predominant today. So consciousness is only explained by the existence of the body, and the body, like a sort of machine, when it stops to work, goes out, and the epiphenomena that was dependent on it, consciousness, becomes nothing, disappears. And it didn't exist before the body. It came at the moment of conception, or following conception, and evolved through life. We don't really know why, what the reason. There's no reason for being. So here again, we fall in this annihilationist view. There's no reason for being. It's random. It just appeared like that. We don't know why. We cannot explain why. It is a derivative of the body. So, of course, it is a view that stands in contrast to the eternalist view that we find in all religions. All eternalist views say that we are not just body, there is something else than the body, the soul, the self, the Atman, the consciousness, mind. There are different terms that psyche that are used. That is independent of the body and that will last after. And according to, for example, the monotheistic religion in particular, and Christianity, for example, it is said that the soul or did not have any antecedent to this life, that it was produced with this life, but that it continues after this life until the last judgment, etc. I don't know all the details, but it has a beginning, but it has no end. some think that the Altman has no beginning and no end. So there's a diversity there. So what these conceptions have in common is that there is a dependent entity from the physical body that will survive the physical body, that will outlast the physical body. And that's why religion is practiced. It's not for this life, but for the post-mortem life that we practice religion. And this is for all, the same for all religions. I mean, we practice religion in this life to assure ourselves of a good life after death, for life after death that is happier, possibility of salvation, etc. And then what can we hope after death? There are all these descriptions, paradise, union with God. There are many different theories on that. But they all have in common the idea that we are not just our body. In the physicalist view that we saw, there's no reason that explains why we're here. And it's annihilationist in the sense that we become nothing. We just completely disappear at death, at the time of death. Since the mind is just an epiphenomena, we become nothing. So the position of Buddhism, that is, as we saw, the middle way, the middle view. Buddhism doesn't subscribe to the annihilationist view, nor to the eternalist view. Why? Why doesn't it subscribe to the eternalist view? We briefly saw it this morning. An eternal entity like the I that is one and permanent cannot be observed on the one hand. When it is a representation, a conception, it is reduced to this. It is not a concrete phenomena that we can observe. And on the other hand, it is not an entity that can explain what is experienced, in which all perception is possible. An entity that is one and permanent, that would be distinct from perceived phenomena. We saw the contradiction between this eternal entity and the possibility of producing, of creating. We saw that this morning. Of course, there are many arguments according to the philosophical doctrine. We're not going to get into that now. But so with regards to the annihilationist view, even if this view is predominant today, one of the problems, or one of the things that we see in this view, is that it is erected as an absolute truth. Nonetheless, even if even based on scientific inquiry methods on which to which we refer today, there's nothing that really explains the production of that explains the link between the production of matter and mind. It's not established. And so in this way, it is a belief. But it is presented as if it's an evidence, as if it is an absolute truth, a truth established by science. But the fact that we have what we call consciousness is an epiphenomena, literally excreted by the mind, just as bile comes from the liver. It's never been proven. But it's not presented like that. It's presented like an assumption, it's always presented as a theory, as if it's true, that it's true. But if we think that the mind is not necessarily produced by the body, then it's seen as a belief. So we have to start from the principle that these are both theories. They are belief. They can be beliefs. They are beliefs. Both are representations, an idea, a conception. So we have to start from this foundation to try and see by oneself. So once again, I wish to underscore the Buddhist approach. It is not a dogmatic approach. It is an approach that invites us to proceed with a deep analysis and a precise analysis, to observe through oneself, by oneself. Often the problem in our way of adhering or to a conception. Why do we adopt a conception? Sometimes we adopt a conception because we like it. It seems logical. It follows our intuition, but not because we've really observed it through ourselves. We haven't come to this conclusion through our own analysis. There is a quote that's often given, attributed to the Buddha, "Oh monks, you must analyze what I say, and will you, just as we analyze to identify the pureness of gold, you must do the same with my teachings and not adopt them or follow them out of respect for me." So sometimes we say, "Oh, I follow this because God said this, or my ancestors said this." Everyone says it. It's just so it's commonly admitted, and so it must be true. So we don't really think. So, but we just follow it. And this has repercussions on us. But what we follow or join is probably the fiction of another person. It's we haven't called it into question. So whatever is proposed here, we have to think. We have to analyze to see if it's established or not. So starting from here, to come back to what we are saying, is perception only due to the body, or does perception take place on the basis of conditions that are not only physical? So the conditions and elements that are not only physical are what has thoughts, what thinks. We have thoughts, we experience, we feel, we perceive. This is what we call mind. We can just stay present, look inside ourselves, and you will see that when you are conscious, you are aware. The fact that you are perceiving that there are thoughts that arise, feelings, etc. That is the reality that we call consciousness. So when we look at how this can be defined, it has a very specific characteristic. It shouldn't be mixed up, confused with the capacity of deduction or of conceptualizing, of calculating. Often we look at one aspect only, the capacity of conceptualizing. For example, some conceive consciousness as the capacity to express what one is feeling. For example, in the 19th century, there was a group of thinkers who considered that babies did not have a consciousness, weren't conscious. For example, babies were operated without anesthetic, and for the same reason, it's said that animals don't experience, that they don't have a consciousness. So here, consciousness was only about expressing what one experiences. That is, to conceptualize what one experiences and to be able to express it. That was defined as consciousness. So there are various definitions. For example, we talk about artificial intelligence today. Here, of course, part of the mind is looked at in terms of its capacity to deduct, to calculate. That is considered as mind, that aspect. But here, when we try to examine consciousness, we have to look beyond all this. That is, underpins all this activity. What enables at the very basis, at the very foundation, that experience is possible, that thoughts can arise. What can we observe in those terms, and how to define it? So in Buddhist literature, Salshing Rikpa, Salwa Rikpa in Tibetan, it means luminosity, clarity. Salwa Rikpa means the capacity to know. Capacity of perception, of experience. It's reduced to the most essential, to the most fundamental, what consciousness is. So in this definition, we see that fundamentally there's a difference with what we call physical reality. Physical reality is not luminous, clear, and does not know. Physical reality, by definition, does not perceive. It is devoid of consciousness. So there's a conceptual distinction that can be made. that in our intuition is linked to the idea of subject and object, of reality that perceives and phenomena that are perceived. What we translate as physical reality does not have this capacity to know and to perceive. So it's difficult to see how two phenomena that have distinct characteristics that are so different, how can one be the cause of the other? How can something that does not know, by definition, how can physical matter produce something so different? For example, one of the reflections, or if we go a bit further, in the physicalist way, in the physicalist conception, as I said earlier, what is predominant are the phenomena that are observed, that are proof of the possibility of perception. But in this conception, that we're so familiar with it that it seems evident, but in reality, we have reified the perceived phenomena that we have separated it from the reality that perceives it. And we've kind of erected it as something that exists independently and for always, independently of consciousness. But if we come back to a more concrete phenomenological level, where we will look at lived, experienced, we never have access to physical reality independent of a consciousness. But if we look at physical reality as being the foundation of consciousness, but in our daily experience, what we grasp as a physical reality, we only grasp it on the basis of an experience that is experienced, that is lived. The world exists not because I saw the world in and of itself, simply it is a given in my consciousness, not because it exists in and of itself. So the consciousness of mind is the basis. The consciousness is the basis of all other phenomena. Without consciousness, there would be no perception of the body, of mind, of phenomena. All this is based on mind. So far from seeing the mind emerge from matter, we see that matter is never perceived independently of consciousness. Physical phenomena emerge from consciousness, we could say. They cannot be observed or found independently of a consciousness. This is not a matter of conceptualizing. It has to be brought back to what is experienced, to our perception. Could you observe something that is not a phenomena of consciousness? So, in this way, every perception of a phenomena is always associated with consciousness, with mind. They are not two entities that can manifest independently of each other. And what is predominant really is consciousness. So once again, as I was saying earlier, our thoughts, our actions really have an effect on our becoming, on our future. What is our future? It's how things manifest to us, and they always manifest on the basis of our consciousness. And of course our consciousness affects our becoming, our future. What will happen to us in the future? It is not the decision of a full-fledged distinct entity, like a divinity, or decided by physical phenomena that exist independently. Neither can be observed independently. Physical reality in and of itself is not observable. We observe appearances. So we will say that appearances are constructed by our perceptual apparatus, our brain, that give us these appearances. But beyond these appearances, we can imagine that there is a physical phenomena that exists in and of itself. But these physical elements, if they existed as entities, we would have to be able to access them. We only have access to different levels of perception. Even if we reach a very, very subtle perception of atoms, it's still a representation. The physical reality in and of itself, independently of our consciousness, is never really accessible. And underpinning this idea of a physical reality existing independently, substantially, we would have to look for its independent reality and substantial. So we assume that physical elements in their very big size can be reduced to atoms. Can we find one atom, one element that exists in and of itself? We will never be able to find something that holds in and of itself. Everything is mutually dependent, in constant movement, in constant change. And even as an independent reality, a reality independent of consciousness can never be grasped. So just from a standpoint of experience. So today, according to Buddhism, we talk about ignorance, avidya, marikpa, not seeing. We can conceive it, but in one's own experience, what does it mean when we say ignorance? So without having any thought or conception, I perceive forms, colors, sounds, etc. And I have an a priori that what is perceived is distinct, and that there's a subject that perceives. That a priori is ignorance. And in my normal, ordinary experience, there is without even going into anything elaborate, there's an impression that there's two entities: subject that knows and phenomena that is known, and that they are independent. But if we go a little deeper, if this a priori or this assumption is founded, there are two things: a phenomena that knows, and a phenomena that is perceived. Outside phenomena, if these entities really existed, we should be able to see them independently and say, in perception, in experience, where do these two entities meet? So, for example, in the visible, what is the part of the visible that is other, and what is the subject in the phenomenon of vision? If we looked at the phenomena of vision, we have the impression that we see something, so we have the impression that there's a subject that sees. But where does the eye that sees stops, and where does the thing that is seen begin? They're given together. You cannot unseal them. You cannot unseal the part of vision that is subject and the part of vision that is object in terms of distinct entity. It's the same as for sound, for hearing, for what is felt. You can try the experience on your own. Just observe. If really there are, as we assume, there are two full-fledged entities, somehow we should be able to experience, to observe them. So we see that there's a non-relationship or a disconnect between our perception and objective reality. The reality is that there is no separation. But we think that they are distinct. So, of course, the tendency we have, there's no separation, as we're so used to conceiving substantially, we say, okay, yes, there is just one. But if there was only just one, I would be you would be I, the table would be me, I would be the table, everything that happens in the world I would live, everything that I experience, others would experience. So we can't find this unity. It's not one. It's not distinct. We cannot observe this distinction. So in this way, we talk about the absence of substantiality. Our way of conceiving things ordinarily is biased. There's always a bias with regards to reality, and this reality, regardless of the bias, cannot be grasped. So this access to reality it's not about having a concept. Of course, we'll use concepts to address other concepts, to see the limits. But in the end, all these concepts that we use, one against the other, all the concepts eventually become extinguished. And this kind of non-biased, untransformed reality will appear to consciousness. And when when we manage to eliminate all our mistaken perceptions, the reality of our mind is naturally free by its felicitous nature, free of all agitations, free of erroneous conceptions that we uphold. This reality becomes manifest. So simply by transforming our thinking, changing our ways of thinking, we can not only improve our everyday life, but also go beyond all confusion, which is liberation from samsara. I will leave space for some questions. And then we'll come back to the context of this teaching and what is implicit in this kind of text. We'll come back to that this afternoon. There's a few minutes left for questions. Thank you, Rinpoche. Could you please speak about the knowing clear mind? When this definition was given, we have a tendency to think, of course, oh, you spoke about Montignac. Can you describe Montignac? You can say, of course, here, of course, it's a supermarket, and then you go here. We immediately want to have a description as if it was something. But the mind, the clear and knowing mind is not an entity. It's something that accompanies you all the time. It is why there is not nothing. It is why you can perceive, feel, understand, and know. So we use the term clear and knowing. It's kind of like saying, if you arrive somewhere, you see on the right this. You see the supermarket on the right, and further on, you see a hill with houses. That's Montignac. So clear and knowing, it's a description. What are we trying to describe? We're trying to describe the reality of our mind. So if we had to use words and concepts, its reality is not something that we can really conceive, that we can name, but it orients us. It gives a direction, and somehow, and in a way, it helps us to discern. What are you? What is your reality? We think I am John, Anne, Peter, or whatever. I have a name. This is my origin. This is where I'm from. And behind all these conceptions, behind this body, etc., I am me. What is the me? What is I? Who is me? So in this grasping of the I think it's the same thing. And I have a very strong attachment to this. I cherish it. I'm partial. I always favor the I to the detriment of everyone else. And this I is associated to sensation, to what is felt. It is something that feels, that experiences, that perceives. That is the I. I exist because I see, I think, I see. Is proof that I am for us. I grasp that there is something. Because I've experienced the phenomena. It's Descartes that says, I think, therefore I am. But Buddha might say, I imagine, I think, so the self doesn't exist. What we saw earlier, this morning. How can an eternal entity think? We saw this morning. Something eternal, substantive, remains identical to itself. It has no beginning, end, or change. Whereas thinking unfolds. It's an activity. It's dynamic. It implies change. So the fact that I think cannot be evidence of a substantive entity that doesn't change. So the idea of clear and knowing is to turn within. If it's not the I, for example, in the phenomena of visual perception, there's the perception, the visual perception that is seen, and I assume that there's a subject that sees it. But when I look, there's just the phenomena of vision. And it would be very difficult to find a subject that is distinct. Of course, I can distinguish all the different elements of visual perception. For example, the presence of the eye, E-Y-E, the presence of light, that there is a visible phenomena, that there is the consciousness, the visible consciousness. That means that there's a visible phenomena. But if I look, I cannot really find in this experience independent entities. All these phenomena are mutually dependent, codependent of each other, and they produce this experience. The nature of what has the experience, the mind, if we look at how it can be defined, it doesn't have any form, no color, no obstacle. That's why we also use the term emptiness. There's no representation that allows us to grasp the nature of mind. It is emptiness. But is it emptiness in the terms of there's nothing that can be grasped? It's not an absence. It's not a void. All these experiences of reality are possible, so we use the term of luminosity and emptiness. The inseparability of luminosity and emptiness. Emptiness is to show that we can't find a color, a form, a localization. I cannot locate it. But does that mean that it's a void, an absence? We can't. All these experiences are possible. So that's why we use the term luminosity. It is all the possibles of experience. And are those two independent? Luminosity and emptiness? No, they're the same. It's the same thing. And so we are mistaken on these two things. If we observe these two things that are the reality, whether we wish to observe it or not, phenomena remain clarity and luminosity and emptiness. All phenomena are that. But if we are mistaken in terms of reality, what reality is, we don't see emptiness. We attribute a subject to the mind. we don't see luminosity, we attribute another, something that is other. Luminosity is the possibility of all experiences, whether it is in thoughts, in dreams, in what is it is everything that is manifest, and we tend to we grasp what is manifest as other, but it is not. It is never really other, outside us. But it is not one either, because it is emptiness. The reality of mind is emptiness. When we talk about the five aggregates, is consciousness an interdependent phenomena, or it is the common denominator of the four others? I can see how the four are in permanent interaction, but is consciousness perceived as the common denominator, or is it a more subtle version of the others? The five aggregates, says Rinpoche, can be divided into two major groups. We can talk about a physical group, and it's the rupa, its form, physical. It means physical reality. It is body. Physical body, physical phenomena. And the four other aggregates are of the mind. There is the category of consciousness in the plural, because there are six, and if we go into more detail, there are 8 consciousnesses, and this implies it's Namshe in Tibetan, Vishnana in Sanskrit, and this always implies a duality. So it is not the mind in its ultimate reality, free of all confusion. It is the manifestation of consciousness, of these different consciousnesses in their confusion. The first 5 consciousnesses are linked to sensorial faculties. For example, simultaneously, these 5 consciousnesses function. We tend to unify them, bring them together as one. But in reality, they are distinct phenomena. We can have an auditive consciousness, visual consciousness, taste consciousness spontaneously, but they have their objects that are distinct. The hearing consciousness can only grasp sounds. It cannot grasp the visible. So in this way, they are distinct. But their fundamental reality is luminosity and emptiness, that we spoke about. It is in their expression of confusion. So the teaching on the 5 aggregates, the Buddha gave these teaching in relation to the problem of the I. Buddha said, there is no I. But he said there are the 5 aggregates. What does this mean? We think I am. So this I that we assume exists, can I observe it? Does it have a form? Does it have a color? Is it something that I can grasp? Those non-Buddhists or other doctrines conceive of an I that exists independently of physical and psychological phenomena, and that they own them. That reflects my mind. It's when I say my mind, my body, it's as if they belong to an I, as if the I existed independently of the physical phenomena that owns them, that own these things. Buddha affirmed that it didn't exist, that it was a belief, and that one had to observe, that had to try and prove the contrary. Is the I something that can be really observed and found? No, it is simply a representation. But does that mean that I am nothing? Remember the middle way. We avoid the two extremes, annihilationist and eternalist. By saying that the I doesn't exist, we have avoided the eternalist extreme. By affirming that the five aggregates exist, we have avoided the annihilationist extreme. The I doesn't exist, but it doesn't mean to say that I am nothing, that it is nothingness, that there is absolutely nothing. There are these psychophysical elements, and we are mistaken by thinking that these psychophysical elements are the I. If we look, so independently of the five aggregates, we cannot observe the I, but within the five aggregates that are supposed to be an exhaustive description of what we call the person, is there one element that can be designated as I, that is an entity that holds up itself as a unit, and that doesn't depend on anything, and furthermore, that always stays the same, that is permanent? That's the idea of the I. The idea of the I is to affirm we have to make explicit what we tend to affirm implicitly when I think about the I. We are affirming that there is a unit, an eternal unit. So we have to make this explicit and see that that's what I'm saying when I say I. So is there a psychophysical element? So all psychological and physical elements are mutually dependent. They are all impermanent. Vision is impermanent. Hearing is impermanent. Smell is impermanent, etc. with regards to consciousness. And that's why these different consciousnesses are impermanent also. And when we spoke about the reality of mind as luminosity and emptiness, even that reality does not add up to a substantive reality. We are going to the most subtle in order to discover our own reality, and this to establish our mind in its original state, free of all confusion and afflictions. And at that stage, there is no grasping of an I that is an independent, substantive, permanent entity. But not having found this entity, we're not before a nothingness, a void. So it's important to understand how we avoid these two extremes. Avoid the extreme, the eternalist extreme and the annihilationist extreme. We have conceptual thought. It's always one or the other. And it's by the observation of reality is always a representation, a reification. That's why I was saying with thoughts and concepts, they all have to be extinguished in order to observe reality beyond any dualistic grasping. That is about cultivating wisdom. What we call cultivating wisdom, prajna, is observing reality. It is not wisdom of the old sage who's been around for a long time, who has nice, wise proverbs. Do not put the plow before the cows. Mm-hmm. Is the thought something that is a clinging? Is yes, says Rinpoche, every thought implies a kind of clinging, because a thought is always a representation, a conception. So with that there is grasping. But the fact that thoughts take place do not oblige us to cling. When a thought occurs and that we come in a way we believe, then we kind of become the victim of our thoughts. Then there is grasping. But when we see thoughts arise and we see them for what they are, then thoughts don't constrain us. A thought arises from what you just said. Are we in the consciousness of thought? The consciousness of thinking about consciousness. Rinpoche says we're making things a little too complicated here. It's more simple than that. Because then there can be infinite digressions. We can think about where do we stop? The consciousness of thought, of another thought, of another thought, of another thought. Here I am speaking within the context of the Buddhist practice, and in particular the contemplative Buddhist practice. So this focuses above all on prajna, wisdom. And this is to observe emptiness, the ultimate nature of mind. There are different terms that are used. And let us imagine that you've heard today we talk about meditation, to talk about shamatha and vipassana. It's kind of a generic term that's used, and probably not the most appropriate translation. But anyway, you try to sit, to adopt the position in 7 points, and you're going to try to contemplate. And if you've been able to recognize the nature of mind, or just try to let the mind develop a greater serenity, stillness, free of mental agitations, which is what we call shamatha. And so you try to do that practice, and you'll quickly realize that the thoughts arise. Whether you want it or not, thoughts arise. When someone makes noise, oh, there's noise, what's that? You don't want to think about it, but you think about what you've done or what you have to do. The greater the clinging is of a situation, the more the thought will arise. So we can think that when a thought arises, with this thought comes the fact that we cling, in other words, that we can't be free from this thought. This thought carries us away. So when a thought is present and you follow it, it leads to a second thought, that leads to a third thought, a fourth thought. And so when you look at our inner life, if I could say, this inner life is made of a succession of thoughts, one after the other. And the constant preoccupation of all these thoughts is to find well-being and to avoid difficulty and suffering. And it's the constant worry of the I. So the mind is always agitated, troubled. So if we try to meditate and just let one's mind be still without necessarily following a thought, we're still thinking. The thoughts just arise, the force of habit. So then the thought arises, what am I going to do? Go away, thoughts. I don't want you to come. That's another thought. Oh, it's such a hassle. I can't stop thinking. That's a thought. So every activity is kind of an activity of thought, of thinking, of thought. So through thought, we can't stop thought. We can't stop thinking. So what to do? There are multiple instructions on this subject, but the important instruction is when a thought arises, well, just let it live its life without following it, without rejecting it. That's what is said in the instructions. So if a thought arises, if you reject it, oh, I don't want you, stop it. The agitation will just continue. If you say towards your thought, oh, that was a good idea, you're right, I believe you, and then a second thought, then you get carried away by the thought. But if you just detach yourself from the thought and you just let it live its life, well, the thought can't do anything. It's not an autonomous entity. it just disappears in and of itself. It fades and disappears. It is when a thought arises, it's neither the opposite. It's not about following it. That's why I said the thoughts are, of course, ways of clinging, but it does not mean to say that we're always the victim of them. If we let our thoughts go, they won't carry us away. So think about that when you get angry, for example, in front of a situation, before a situation, someone insults you, or of course it's a thought. He said this, it got on my nerves. These are all seizing, these are all graspings, clinging. And the more value you attach to this, that you have to know the nature of a thought. The nature of a thought is a fiction. Thoughts are fiction. Thoughts are representations. A thought does not allow one to grasp reality. It only gives us representations, certainly useful ones, but it's still a fiction in its reality. So whatever we think regards what somebody said or thinks, or how I see the world, it's like this, like that. Everything we're doing is to evoke fictions. Some are quite gross, and others are more subtle. But whatever the case, they are mental representations. Quite conventional. It's invented. Sorry. That's the nature of thought. If we see this aspect, we're going to start really believing in thoughts. We believe in our thoughts, because we believe that they are not fiction, and that thoughts lead us to perceive or get a glimpse of reality. That's what we believe. And the more we think that thoughts are right, then we believe it. And so, for example, we say, oh, he is mean. I believe it, and this reinforces my hostility, and that leads to violence. If I say that, oh, it's just a fiction, well, I won't believe it. And if I don't believe it, I will grasp it less. And then I will not be as taken by it.